Hey people, and welcome to this second video of my 5-part series on tuning the drum set. In the first part I gave you a little introduction and an idea of the approach of tuning the drums and why it's so important. In this video we will actually change some drum heads and I will show you a few different methods for tuning the drums. So at the end of this video I hope you will be able to decide for yourself creatively which method you want to use to get your desired sound out of the drums. We will use the tom-toms of this set and I will show you the range of sounds we can get out of one single drum with different drum heads and different methods. Just one thing before we start, we will record everything with just one single microphone mounted on the top of the camera. So everything you hear is just how the drum sounds in this room without any effects. Okay, we start with the 12-inch rack tom, but we don't go to the drum set, but we take the drum out of the drum set and put it here, because then we can look at the whole drum at both sides and we don't have any resonances from the whole drum kit. Let's start from scratch and take off both heads at first. For this I use 2 tuning keys because it saves time and I will probably drop one anyway. Here I also take small steps at first and do not loosen one screw after another completely. This has 2 reasons. First, the head does not warp so much if you want to use it again, and I make sure that the lugs are not disproportionately stressed, which could damage the shell of the drum. I like to use tuning keys that are heavy and maybe even have extra weights like these ones from Pearl. It takes a little practice, but if you tap it the right way, you can completely loosen one screw with just one push, so you're even faster than most cordless screwdrivers. And here's another reason why it's good to use 2 tuning keys. A tip for laying the hoop aside. Place it with a twist on the floor or a table. This will tilt the screws and they stay in place and do not fall out. A change of heads is always a welcome opportunity to remove dust or other debris from the drum and check the bearing edges. For this you slide your finger over it, and if you feel small bumps or kinks, you can even them out with a very fine sandpaper. If we take off the second head too, we can also check the shell for damages or missing or loose screws. In addition, we can put it on a perfectly straight surface and illuminate it with a lamp. When we see light coming through, the bearing edge is not perfectly even and level. That's not too bad. The heads are flexible and compensate for that. If it's so deformed that the shell even rocks on the surface, then you should have it revised by a drum builder. A round shell with intact bearing edges is the basis for a good sound, because it is able and responsive to be tuned in all the different ways. I like having the drum on a stool because it is at a comfortable height and the lower head is always dampened, which is important if we want to tune the head using our ears. Everything that follows you can practice with a used head, but with new ones you just have a bigger range and the final result will probably be much better. If you need more tips on how to pick the right drum head for your desired sound, check out part 1 of this series. Today we use an Adoro coated single ply head as a better head, which is a single layer white coated head. We insert the tuning rods and screw them in. In this case also into the suspension for the stand. I thread the screws first with my fingers and then use the tuning keys again. We want the tuning screws to just barely touch the hoop, so they can still move a little bit. But before we tighten and tune the head, we also put on the rezo head so the bearing edge does not remain unprotected. For this we use an ambassador coated, which is the counterpart to the better head from the brand Remo. With this manufacturer it is often recommended to fold over the edge of the drum head before we put it on the drum to loosen glue residue. That would happen on its own when we put tension on the head, but we'd rather do it now so the tone won't change when we have found the perfect tuning. I put some pressure in the center of the head so it's placed nicely in the middle of the drum before I put on the hoop again. I'll do that a few more times between the steps to make sure the head is always centered. Now we tighten the screws again with our fingers until they touch the hoop. We can also use the weight of the tuning key here again. If you hit it well, the screw will lower itself entirely with just one push. When all the screws touch the hoop, I center the head once again and then tighten the screws one after the other as far as I can with my fingers, always the two opposed ones. Then we have a relatively uniform starting position. You can also do that with the tuning key, because with the leverage you can feel relatively well which screws are the loosest, so you can correct a little bit to bring all to the same tension. Now we increase the tension to make a good starting point for tuning. To do this, I always tighten the two opposing screws a half turn until the head is tight enough so it can vibrate and starts to have a tone. Every time I turn the screw, I also turn the whole drum one position further. With a little practice you can do this very fast and will save a lot of time in the long run. Doing this has another benefit. You keep your arms and hands in the same position while tightening the screws. This way you keep a steady and reliable feeling with which you can compare the tension of the individual screws much better. Now the screws are roughly at the same tension, but the sound is still too low for my taste. So in the fine-tuning we will adjust upwards. For this first method I will show you the opposite head must be dampened. Then we hit with the stick right next to the respective tuning screw and compare the pitch. It is very important that you always hit with the exact same distance to the rim and with the same power. The location and strength of the strokes often affect the sound more than the tension of the screws. Now we always increase the tension of those screws next to which we hear the lowest sound. In the beginning the differences are very large and you can clearly hear which screws are the lowest. We adjust these by increasing their tension. By doing this we of course change the pitch of the other screws, so we have to compare again and again. You should start by looking for the biggest outliers. Those are often directly opposite. If you adjust them, the differences are getting smaller, so we are approaching in smaller and smaller steps. If it takes a little bit to get the head to the desired tuning, we should not always tune the lower screws up, because this way the overall tone would become too high. So we balance this by lowering the screws with the highest pitch. When we do this, we should turn them a little bit looser than necessary and tighten them again just a bit. More about why we do this in part 5. If all the screws sound relatively same, I stretch the head once again firmly. Make sure that you press right in the middle and exactly vertically. Now the sound is a little bit lower again, so why would I do this? Well, if I don't, the head will stretch just from being played and will detune quickly. I want to get all of this out right now so the head will stay in tune much longer later on. Now let's adjust that once again. Now all the tuning screws have pretty much the same tone. Now we do exactly the same with the batter head. When the differences get smaller and smaller, it often feels impossible to decide which screw is lower or higher. Don't worry, this is normal and just a matter of practice. You're also training your hearing with this method. It's hard to hear a precise tone with the drum anyway, because the overtones might fool you into believing that a screw is higher than the other one when it's actually lower. So here is my most important tip for you. Listen carefully to that pitch which stands out the most at each screw and sing it out loud. If you sing or hum the sounds of the two tuning screws that you compare, you can judge which one is higher or lower much better just by listening to your own voice. It takes some getting used to, but it will help you, I promise. In between steps, I compare the pitches of the two heads. There are 3 options for all drums. Both heads have the same tone, the better head is higher than the resonant head, or the resonant head is higher than the better head. Most drummers prefer the last option. The rezo head is a little bit higher than the better head, since it gives you a good balance of attack and sustain. If the tuning is the same, you will have a very long tone, and if the top head is higher, you will have a shorter and often a decaying tone. This dome often causes problems, mainly in the studio but also live, which is why this tuning is used less often, but it's definitely not inferior. I would encourage you to try out all the options you have, so you get a feel for them and know the options you have with your drum and can decide for yourself which one you want to pick in each situation. This is what the drum sounds like when the better head is lower than the resonant head. And now the better head is higher than the rezo head. And now both heads have almost the same pitch. On its own, the drum sounds pretty good to my ears, but of course it has to work well with the others in the set. But it's a great starting point. This method I just showed you has been shown many times and it's pretty common, but as you have seen, it's pretty lengthy. It takes some time and you can only do this in a quiet location as you have to listen very carefully. Well, granted, this trains your ears and that's a good thing, but maybe there are some other methods that are quicker and you can also use when it's pretty noisy. Maybe you have to change your drumhead right before the show. And there are actually 2 methods that are much quicker and you don't have to listen as carefully. And I will show you those with the 16-inch floor tom. We will put an emperor coated drumhead on this one. And again, we take it out of the drum set and look at just the one single drum right here. We begin with the wrinkle method. Again, we start by putting on the head, centering it by pressing in the middle and tightening the screws with our fingers. Once all the screws are finger tight, we press firmly in the middle of the drum head. Watch out that you do this with the palm of your hand, not with your knuckles, and exactly from above. Now we just increase the tension of those screws where we see the most and the biggest wrinkles until all have disappeared. If you can't really see the wrinkles because of the lighting or because you have a coated head where it's harder to see, just use your finger, you can feel the wrinkles. When all the wrinkles have disappeared, we are already finished. With this method, we can quickly get a uniform tension in the head. Now we do the same thing with a better head. This wrinkle method has many benefits. First of all, of course, that you can use it in a loud environment. It works so well that sometimes you don't even have to adjust the sound. Just eliminating all the wrinkles might already give you a great sound with which you want to play, and sound engineers can work well. So you can use this method if you don't have much time to change or tune a drum head. Also, it has the benefit that because of the pressure you put in the middle, the head is always perfectly centered and already stretched. And there's another benefit if you use a single ply rezo head and a double ply better head. Then, just eliminating the wrinkles will already give you a great interval between the 2 drum heads. The rezo head a little bit higher than the better head, which is the most common tuning. But be careful, eliminating all the wrinkles with a better head might give you a tension which is a little bit too high for most people. So what I would do is simply put a little bit less pressure on the better head and then eliminate all the wrinkles which I see, and if I do so I usually get a pretty good sound. So just by doing this, we get this interval between the two heads. And that's what the whole drum sounds like. To my ears it already sounds great. At the very least it's a great starting position for further tuning, which you can achieve pretty quickly with this method. The third method I want to show you is also pretty quick, and you can also use it in a loud environment. Keep in mind that taking off the head is always a good opportunity to check the screws, the shell and the bearing edge of the drum. Again, we fold over the edge of the drum head, put it on the shell, put the hoop on and then just finger tighten all the screws. By the way, just finger tightening the top head of the floor tom already gives you a short and dry bass drum-like sound like Benny Greb plays, for example. I personally like a little bit more sustain in my floor tom, so we will increase the tension a little bit. With this method, we lean on the hoop right next to each tuning screw and then with our fingers increase the tension all the way we can. Then we move to the next screw. To get a uniform tension in the head, I try not to put on too much pressure at first and go at least 2 rounds. That's what the drum sounds like now. It's still a little bit too low for me, so I just do one more round. Now it sounds like this. To my ears, this already sounds great, or again, is at least a good starting position. So as you can see, this third method is also pretty quick and you can also do it in a loud environment. Now let's listen to both toms in the set. This recording has been made with the first method, where we used our ears to get the head in tune. If you take it very seriously, you would have to tune your heads over and over again if you change the pitch. But because we got them in tune very thoroughly before, I just increased the tension of the barrel heads evenly. This way they should stay pretty much in tune. And now they should each have about the same tone as the resonance head. Now let me show you an even higher tuning, which is often used in jazz music. So that's pretty much all I wanted to tell you about tuning the tom-toms. I hope you found this helpful, and again, now you have to practice it. Don't just watch this whole series but don't do anything about it. Rather, pause right now, pick 1 or 2 things you found interesting today and go right to your drum set and try it out for yourself. I wish you the best of luck. If you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe, leave a like and a comment below, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, goodbye.